And we're live. Good evening, everybody. My name is Claire. I'm the event coordinator for Village Books in Bellingham and Linden, Washington. I am delighted to be hosting tonight's event with this great collection of females. This is going to be an interesting and fun event. A few things first about Crowdcast. If you look in your upper right-hand screen, you'll see a follow button. I think it's a green button. If you click on that follow button, then you can see all the events that we have already hosted. They're all recorded there. And also the events that are coming up. That takes you, that's our Crowdcast channel. And we have a lot of events. I'm adding to the calendar all the time, so I encourage you to do that. If you're happening to hear an echo, the first thing you might try doing is turning down the volume on your computer. If that doesn't work, put on some headphones. And if that doesn't work, make sure that you have only one window open in your browser, only one Crowdcast window open. Those are the three things that you can try if you're hearing an echo. So an upcoming event that I'm very excited about because it's close to my heart. We have opened up 3 of our Village Books book groups to the public again. We are meeting on Zoom. My personal book group is called Motherhood by the Book, and we read fiction and nonfiction that is devoted to the theme of motherhood. And on October 11th, I am delighted that Megan O'Connell, the author of this book, and now we have everything on motherhood before I was ready, she is going to actually join us for our discussion. So it's going to be a book group discussion as well as an author event. And that is on October 11th at 2 p.m. That's a Sunday. You can go to villagebooks.com and check out right on our homepage. I've got it listed. You can see how to join our event. That is open to everybody. So I encourage anyone to look into that. While this is a free event, I want to thank anyone who made a contribution at registration to our event programming. We really appreciate it in this strange time that we find ourselves in right now. We're doing our best to maintain our robust Village Books event programming that everybody expects and knows and appreciates. And so to those of you who kicked in a couple of dollars, we appreciate that. And if you didn't, that's fine too. We're happy to be able to provide this free programming. Let's see. We're going to keep the chat enabled on the right side of the screen. If you want to respond to anything that you hear tonight that's read, or if you want to make a comment or ask a question, please feel free to do that. I do want to remind everybody that our virtual readings gallery is a safe space. So any user who exhibits offensive, hateful, or inappropriate behavior will be dismissed from the event immediately. So. And then if you want to ask a question and you don't want it to perhaps kind of get lost in the chat on the side, if you look down at the bottom of the screen, you'll see that it says ask a question. If you click on ask a question, a little box pops up, you type in your question, and then it will be held there until we get to the Q&A portion of the evening. So I encourage you all to use that. Again, at the bottom of the screen, the ask a question button. And then another extremely important button on this screen is this one right here, this green one. It says purchase Fury here. Did anybody hear an echo just there? Is any? Yes? Okay. Now I don't hear it. Okay. There's that echo. Okay. All right. Thank you, Selena. Selena says yes, it's good now. I don't know what that was. Anyway. Purchase Fury here, that green button right there. That is a button that takes you directly to the Village Books website where you can purchase a copy of the featured book tonight. We would appreciate your considering supporting our independent bookstore, and the authors and the contributors that are here tonight would appreciate it as well. And I think that's it for my housekeeping nuts and bolts announcements. So I get to introduce our presenters this evening. We have both editors and some contributors to this fabulous book right here, Fury. Women's Lived Experiences During the Trump Era. So we have both editors. We have Amy Roost and Alyssa Hirschfeld. Amy Roost is a documentary podcaster and freelance journalist. She's an Annenberg School of Journalism 2019 California Health Journalism Fellow and recipient of numerous journalism awards for her op-ed columns appearing in San Diego Union Tribune publications. She has a forthcoming book, a follow-up to Fury, coming out in 2021, I think in March. It's called Heroics, Women's Lived Experiences During the Coronavirus Pandemic. So we'll be looking forward to that one. And then joining her tonight is co-editor of Fury. Alyssa Hirschfeld is a psychotherapist and writer, as well as being the co-editor of Fury. She's the author of a novel, Living Waters, From Harvard Halls to Sacred Falls, and a memoir, This Whole Wide World is Just a Narrow Bridge. Her academic articles have appeared in several psychological journals. And then the contributors that we have joining us this evening are Meg Weber. She writes memoir about sex, grief, love, family, therapy, and tangled relationships. She writes about edges, about experiences and identities that hover at the perimeter. Her debut memoir, A Year of Mr. Lucky, is forthcoming from Sincere Publishing in 2020. We are also joined tonight by Sarah Amina Osman. She's a writer and teacher residing in Los Angeles, California. Her work has been in Argot Magazine, Hello Giggles, and Vocally. She loves to travel and has a deep appreciation for sloths. So do I. And then finally, Elena Perez works to advance environmental justice, address climate change, and engage marginalized populations to promote healthier and more resilient communities. So please join me in your homes or wherever you happen to be. Thunderous applause. First, we're going to bring up Amy Roost.
Hi, Claire and everybody out there in cyberspace. Thank you so much, Claire, for that wonderful introduction and for hosting us under these circumstances. As you know, I have a lot of connections in Bellingham, and I certainly wish I were there instead of here in San Diego, but this is the next best thing. And I really appreciate all the flexibility that goes into keeping these events going. As a former events coordinator myself, I know it's a little bit like changing the wheels as you're driving down the road. And so thank you for all the adjustments that you've made to continue this for the community. I wanted to talk a little bit tonight about Tuesday night. Normally, I have a sort of a prepared introduction, but I think I need to address something that I think probably many of us are feeling, both the contributors and the audience, which is Tuesday night. If you happen to watch the debate, and even if you didn't, you probably couldn't avoid all the pundits talking about it. Tuesday night was really difficult, and I know Alyssa, my co-editor, is going to talk about this in the context of abuse, but I want to talk about it a little bit myself. And the thing that I want to say is that the reason the genesis for this book came about because of a feeling that I had, a very lonely feeling that what I was experiencing wasn't being shared by anyone else. And the reason I didn't think anybody else felt the way I did is because women suffer through so much in silence. And those who choose to speak, even in their toughest moments, give power to the rest of us. And so my purpose for writing this book was that, first of all, I wanted to know if there were other people who were feeling as I did on Tuesday night, which is exactly how I felt leading up to the 2016 election. I felt like I was under assault. The things that Donald Trump would say and his behavior, it just felt like an assault on all of my senses, and an assault on the presidential campaign process and democracy, on our politics, which, as awful as they can be sometimes, and I've worked on Capitol Hill, so I do know, it felt like an assault. And so thankfully my husband is a clinical psychologist, and he came home from work one night and he told me that there were just all of his patients, this was back in 2016, all of his patients after the election were mentioning how traumatized they felt. And that gave me the idea that, I would like to collect these stories of not just trauma, but these experiences, what people were feeling at the time, and capture those for posterity's sake. One of our contributors, Lorraine Kamanzuli, who has a PhD in psychology, wrote about trauma in Fury. And I don't normally read from other people's work, and I am going to get to mine here in just a second. But she said, "We are traumatized, but these, the contributors to Fury, are resilient. Though many have descended into those frozen depths, they have also found their way back up the nervous system through mutual respect and support, and felt mobilized once again, not just by the frustration of not being heard or seen by this administration, not just by anger toward one leader, but by their collective fury against a system that sustains him. If despair is the malady, then fury may just be the remedy." And in that, she mentions that women knew. And Elena Perez is going to read from her beautiful piece in a few moments. But just one other note about the genesis of this book is that the original title for it was "We," meaning women, knew. And I'm so happy that I was able to bring together 38 women to share their experiences and to build this community and to give voice to our concerns and our hopes and our anguish and our feelings. So with that, I'm going to read from my piece, which is called "New Normal." And just a little setup, which is that in 2016, October, on Halloween 2016, a few days before the election, my son, who had been in the hospital for 2 months after suffering a stroke and having brain surgery, returned home. He was 22, to live with my husband and I while he went to a brain injury rehab clinic for several months. And so I was going through quite a lot when the election happened, and wasn't dealing with it all that well, given the multiple circumstances. So this is a sort of a journal that I kept during that time, and it toggles back and forth between what was happening in the election, leading up to the election, and what was happening in my personal life. November 9th, 2016. For the second time in 10 days, I am faced with a new normal. Donald Trump is the president-elect. While waiting for the coffee to brew, I glance at Facebook on my phone. The first thing I see are celebratory remarks about Trump's victory from written by a Christian fundamentalist high school friend who rarely posts to social media. Each post ends with the words, "Praise be to God," as if God somehow ordained the election results. I unfriend her. Next, I come across a comment by a friend of my stepson's, a white male millennial. It reads, "Apparently, lots of women like to have their pussies grabbed." I respond, "Dear white men, seriously, for just one day, shut the fuck up. Take some time to reflect, bros, and have a good, long look in the mirror. What have you done in your life to set women back or kept them from rising up? Have you too stereotyped women in your lifetime? Have you consciously or unconsciously objectified women and contributed to voters having such a low regard for women that they would elect a race-baiting, misogynistic liar to be president?" Later in the morning, Stuart, sorry for the echo there. Stuart, that's my oldest son. Stuart texts me a photo of his college library where overnight someone spray painted swastikas on the bathroom walls. I can't take it. I also can't look away. November 10th, 2016. I listened to Trump's press conference on my way home from dropping Spencer at rehab. He mentions that he's considering keeping two provisions of the Affordable Care Act: the prohibition against insurers denying coverage because of a patient's pre-existing condition, a provision both Stuart and Spencer will depend upon their entire lives, and the one that allows parents to keep their children on their insurance plans until they turn 26, which currently applies to both my sons. Hearing that Trump will preserve the key components of Obamacare is a massive relief, until a commentator points out that Trump's plan will never work. Without a mandate for everyone to purchase health insurance, the pre-existing condition provision would send insurance companies into a death roll. I've gone through life blithely assuming I could handle anything thrown my way. Now that I'm forced to prove it, I'm not sure I can. My reserves are used up. I just want someone to hug me, hold my hand, leave flowers on my doorstep, bring me a hot roast beef sandwich with extra cheese, or simply text me a funny cat video. I've suffered a crack or two or three, and I'm afraid that I won't be able to hold myself together much longer. Spencer, who knows nothing of my gossamer thin nerves, arrives home depressed. Who can blame him? One day he's working his way toward a college degree in engineering, mountain biking and snowboarding on the weekends. And the next day he's using a walker and can't find his way to take out the trash. I suggest we go to the beach and let nature work its magic. As we amble north along the shoreline, mist settles on our matching curls. Salt rims our lips, and the rhythm of the waves steadies our breathing. When the stars come out, we turn back for home, ready to once again face reality. A dear friend calls to check up on me. I confide, I'm barely hanging on. She, a recovering alcoholic, offers some ironic and excellent advice. It's okay for you to have a glass of wine. Spencer would want you to. I cuddle with Ain, apologize for my recent testiness and for having triaged his needs into obscurity these past several months. He takes my hand, kisses it, and forgives me. I pour that glass of wine and savor it in small sips. Dinner consists of a warm baguette with a wedge of brie cheese. I read for a while, a quiet novel by Wendell Berry, and then head to bed early because I'm tired and because there is nothing noble or pretty about an exhausted martyr. So that gives you just a little flavor, but every essay is completely different, and that's what I think makes the book so wonderful. And every essay is true because everybody's lived experience is true. It has to be, right? Because it's your experience. So with that, I will pass it to my co-editor, who I just have to say, Alyssa's probably tired of hearing me say it, maybe not. Alyssa jumped in when I was ready to give up on this project, and I had just reached the end of my rope, and I had a lot going on, as you just heard. And so I was just kind of like, I can't do this. And so I asked a group of people who had submitted essays if there was anybody who wanted to co-edit with me, and Alyssa raised her hand. And this book never would have been written and come out if it hadn't been for Alyssa. So I owe her just a huge debt of gratitude. And take it away, Alyssa.
Thank you, Amy. I was thrilled to join you, and I'll say more about that in a minute. I just want to thank Village Books and all of the wonderful organizing that went into this event. Thank you, Claire. And I'm happy to be here with Amy and all of our contributors, and some of whom I haven't met before because of COVID and having to do everything virtually. But it's good to meet Elena and Sarah virtually, and anyway, glad all of the listeners are here with us. So I was very happy when a mutual friend of Amy's and mine, introduced me to Amy and told me about this book that she was planning, because leading up to the 2016 election, I was feeling more and more anxious, angry, agitated, just sort of, I could see everything that we've actually seen come out in the last 4 years. I had a sense of what was coming, and I think there were a couple things that had me on edge. As a woman, as a Jewish woman, as at the time I was married to a Latino man. So all of Trump's dog whistles really resonated and hit deeply. I was raised in a Jewish community, about 30 years out from the Holocaust, and I was really sensitized from a young child to be aware of any time that any group is being demonized or stigmatized, and I was very aware of fascist kind of motifs and language. So all of that on a personal level had me very upset and stirred. And then, like Amy's husband, I work in a psychotherapy practice, and I was hearing, for the first time in 30 years of practicing, I was hearing the majority of my clients talking about what's going on politically and talking about how they too, that's my cat, how they too were feeling stirred up. And in particular, I was hearing some regular themes coming up from my clients. I was hearing women who had narcissistic parents or narcissistic partners who were seeing in Trump's behaviors abusive language and attitudes that they recognized from their own experience with their family. I was also hearing from survivors of sexual abuse, predominantly women, but also some men who felt, basically felt unsafe, having a perpetrator leading our country. Some women talked about being raped all over again every time they heard Trump speaking. And then younger clients talking about their fears of climate change. I have some, actually my own daughter, as well as clients in their 20s who are terrified because they don't see a future. They don't know what kind of future they'll be, and they're aghast that we have a president and an administration that denies that reality. Also, young people who are upset about gun violence, afraid to go to school, or wonder about what kind of shoes they should wear to school in case they have to run away from an active shooter. So just, all kinds of anxiety and depression. And in fact, the American Psychological Association has put out some studies that show how much statistically the rates of anxiety and depression have increased over the last 4 years. And in terms of the debate, just before I read a short selection from my piece, so watching the debate, I was aware of the dynamic between Trump and Biden really being what people who live in dysfunctional narcissistic, who live with a narcissist and experience narcissistic domestic violence, what they experience. And I think that we saw, those of us watching or who could bear to watch, saw that exhibited Tuesday night in terms of Trump's relentless badgering, taunting, not listening, gaslighting, lying, disrespect, all of the above. And Biden's attempt, which I think were valiant, to try to know how to respond, you know, to somebody who doesn't listen, who's not respectful, who runs over you. And what do you do with a person like that? And so I actually posted on Facebook something speaking to that dynamic that we were all witnessing. And I was really surprised to get such a response from the post. And in fact, the post ended up being shared over 60 times by my friends who saw it, and then shared beyond that by their friends once they shared it. So I think what that speaks to is that we are really, well, first of all, along with what Amy was saying, that that we're having the support of many of us experiencing it. And the more of us point it out, the more, you know, once we name it, we can actually say, no, this really is happening, and this really isn't normal. And this is really like a total violation of our norms and of human decency. And we can start to fight back and do something about it. So I think, you know, I think it just shows that people really resonated and felt a sort of group support around it being spoken about. So with that, I'll read just a very short piece. I have actually two short essays in the book. One is called Trigger Warning: The Supreme Court May Be Dangerous to Your Mental Health, which of course is, unfortunately, I mean, was true when Kavanaugh was being nominated, and that's what I write about. But of course, what's happening now with the Supreme Court is of course very triggering for a lot of us, and angering. My other piece from which I'll read is called The Challenges of Being a Psychotherapist in the Age of Trump. And I write about how much the political has come into people's psychological, or how much it's affecting people psychologically, and really can't be separated in a way from people's personal experience. And how I've become much more open to talking about political issues in the therapy room. You know, many of you know that therapists are trained to leave our personal religious beliefs, political beliefs out of the room, but it's become really important to me at this time to normalize and validate people's experiences, including, you know, even if I show my political bias, which I do, but, you know, to normalize people's reactions. So I have realized that since psychotherapists are in the business of promoting communication and interpersonal relationships within our private offices, we have a crucial role to play in fixing our broken system. People on different sides of political issues have forgotten how to debate civilly or even how to listen to one another, much less how to negotiate and compromise. I never imagined that empathy would become a political act, but alas, it has. People on opposite sides of the political divide, as well as people of different cultural backgrounds and faiths, seem unwilling and sometimes unable to empathize with different perspectives. But when we listen deeply to one another's stories, meaning we practice seeing things from another's perspective, while silencing the voice inside that wants to disagree or tell our own side, we learn that we all want the same basic things: a good life for ourselves and our families, good health, an adequate income to provide for our needs, a community to belong to, and a sense of meaning and purpose. When I teach clients to feel compassion for themselves and to empathize with their partners and family members, I hope that I'm also providing them with the skills to empathize with their fellow human beings, whomever they may be. This may be the most important political action I can take in this period in the country's history. So with that, I would like to introduce Elena Perez, and she will tell you about the very, very powerful piece she has in this collection. It's been there. So Elena?
Thanks so much. And it really is wonderful to be on the call with everybody and to meet them. And I look forward to listening to Sarah and Meg's pieces as well. I wish that I could. I'm going to do this flip. I'm going to read mine first, and then, and I'm also noting the time. It's like 30 minutes, right, Claire? So I'm not going to go too much over. But I wish I could have like John Oliver or Trevor Noah or somebody really funny read my piece, but it's me, and I'm not a great reader, so please bear with me. But it's called "It's Been There." Maybe you haven't noticed if you haven't experienced it, if you haven't recognized your own role in perpetuating it, intentionally or otherwise. But it's been there. It's what got Trump elected in the first place. It's why politicians treated our 44th president with blatant disrespect. It's why Middle Easterners pose as Latinos soon after September 11th. You know it must be bad if they're claiming to be Latinos, my dad chortled. That was nearly 18 years ago. Yes, the Trump administration makes me depressed, demoralized, and angry. But this is nothing new. Trump is the result of how disconnected we've become from the realities of our society. A system riddled with racism, sexism, and biases of all kinds. Trump has finally brought this blatant discrimination to the attention of those who assumed everything was good, because maybe for them, it was. That's just a brief excerpt, and I think it's really interesting, especially now. And I wrote it because, of course, when Amy first reached out and asked if I'd write a piece, I was thinking about all of the ways that that stress had kind of expressed itself in my body. I'd breaking out of my face, and could feel like wings of stress, like expanding across my back. And the other, anxiety that I had experienced. But in 2017, while I was working, I recognized that, there's very little representation in environmental agencies, in conservation organizations, and there's a lot of issues, from climate justice issues to environmental justice issues that need to be addressed and are often overlooked. And it's because there's not adequate representation of perspectives in these institutions. And I was fortunate to have been part of the Government Alliance on Race and Equity. And while I was there and, having discussions with colleagues about the importance of really addressing race and equity within our institutions and addressing systematic racism, I recognized this huge disconnect with a lot of people not understanding the systematic racism, because if you look at the individual and you think, well, I'm not racist, so she's fine, it's very easy to just think that you're not part of the problem, that is, it's not something that needs to be addressed. And so you end up overlooking something that is a very serious problem, as we can see now, and something that, needs to be dealt with from the ground up. And so I think for me, it just was more shocking that more people, and not that I would necessarily blame anybody individually. I think it's just more exposure. And if you're not aware, and if it's not something that you're familiar with or have experienced yourself, then you might not realize that it's there, or it's easy to overlook it if you haven't had to experience it. But it's also shocking because it's something that so many people experience all the time. And so I feel like my piece really speaks to that this isn't something that just went away, and it's something that has been part of our history for a very long time, but people feel uncomfortable speaking about it. And the interesting thing is that you do need to be in that uncomfortable space to grow. And so it is an opportunity when you are in that space to be able to improve and to become better. And even though we're in a very dark space now, I am hopeful that we can improve. And I mean, personally, I always try to do my best to be better. There's so much to learn. But I also think that our country, we have so much potential, and not looking to blame or to point fingers, but really to looking at opportunities for how do we make this a better system so that we can. And yeah, so next up, Meg.
I just want to say thank you to everyone for being here, and thank you to Claire and Village Books for hosting us. I am happy to be able to be part of this company with everybody reading. I wrote my piece originally for an event in Portland called the Election Monologues. That was a live reading event that happened the night of the inauguration back in 2017. And then when I saw the call for the book that Amy was putting together, it appeared that my piece would be a good fit. And so I was excited to be included. The piece is called Vigil of Hope, and I'm just reading a piece of it. When I was a child, my mom taught me to play pickup sticks. Dump multicolored sticks into a pile. Some sticks carry more value than others. Claim one at a time without disrupting any other stick. If you move a stick other than the one you're trying to move, lose a turn, unless no one notices. How it must have felt like the ultimate metaphor of her life as the mother of 8 kids in 13 years. We were raised in a family where it wasn't polite to discuss politics. What I remember about presidential elections growing up was my mom saying that she was a registered Democrat so that her vote would always cancel out my father's Republican vote. I didn't want to know if any of my siblings or my father voted for Trump, especially with my mother no longer alive to nullify his vote with hers for Hillary. I had resigned myself that at least some of my family would vote either for Trump or against Clinton. It seemed I might find clues on social media about how my family members were leaning, but Facebook is a vortex of uncertainty. I shared plenty of pro-Hillary, anti-Trump posts, most of them about what this kind of presidency might do to my kid and their divorced queer parents, or to the trans and queer clients in my counseling practice. How would my people fare in a game of pickup sticks at the hands of Trump and his cronies? On election night, we switched restlessly between episodes of The Gilmore Girls and the election returns. As more states were called red, I felt increasingly despondent, scared, sick. When we finally went to bed under the news that Hillary lost, I cried myself to sleep. As the alarm went off the next day, I hoped somehow it had all been a bad dream, but it wasn't. It was going to be a hard day as a therapist working with marginalized communities. How would I support my clients when I felt so devastated? The first client of the day casually mentioned the election in a voice I heard as overly cheerful, She seemed unaffected, but noticed my reaction to her tone. "Are you upset about the election?" she asked. I was stunned. Yes, it's terrifying for me and my family. I felt I'd crossed a line, disclosed too much, but my filters were off, probably water damage from all the crying I'd done overnight. Some clients were as torn apart by the election results as me. I started sessions the way I often do, asking, "How are you?" That day, it held more context than usual. How are you with the news of this terrible tyrant being somehow elected as president? How are you, a queer person, a person of color, someone who works for social and racial justice on a day like today? In the quiet of my office between sessions, I felt a familiar layer of isolation, an echo of all the ways I am invisible in my family. For the last several years, I've been working to show up as more of myself with my siblings and parents. I want to be seen by them, so I challenge myself to give them what I wish they would offer me. That afternoon, I texted one of my brothers, a high school teacher. "Hey, I know you worked really hard for Measure 97. I'm sorry it didn't pass." He replied immediately, "Thanks, I appreciate it. I know the presidential election result isn't what any of us hoped. I'm thinking of you and your family too." I felt visible and noticeably calmer. Later that day, an email arrived from a different brother telling me he was thinking of me and to let him know if we need anything as we all move through these next 4 years. Maybe my brothers were horrified about this result too. No, they aren't queer like me. They don't counsel vulnerable populations. They aren't raising a biracial kid as part of a same-sex divorced couple. But maybe for their own reasons, they also didn't want this dangerous misogynist to be our next president. I contemplated how to use my power and privilege to speak out against this man who is not my president. The Women's March on Washington was tempting. I wanted to be there, to stand up against bigotry and hatred. And then my fear showed up. What if I go and something happens and I can't get back to my kid? It's pick up sticks all over again, every stick in a tangled pile. If I choose activism and it goes awry, what happens to my family? If I stay home to stay safe, how do I use my voice to promote justice and equality? I always wondered why my mom's entire life revolved around her family. She was trying to pare down the number of sticks she had to manage. Thank you so much. And next I'm going to go ahead and introduce Sarah.
Hi there, I am Sarah Amina Osman. First, I would like to thank Claire and Village Books for hosting us, and I'm very honored to be featured with all of these incredible women. It's very cool. So a little bit about my piece. I am a teacher. Normally I teach high school English. This year it's middle school. And right now this actually feels a lot like my Zoom classroom, and that I can't see any of you and you're all on mute, which is not too far off from how my students are. Anyway, so the essay I wrote is called Fight Like Hell. I wrote it really in reaction to teaching under Trump and the challenges that came with that. So the piece takes place really right after the election, and what we did in our classroom to try and handle that. So here we go. All right. When I first learned he had won, my fiance cannot stop shaking. His eyes are glued to the screen. He keeps running his fingers through his hair. It would be 2 days before Paul would stop shaking. A flood of texts came in from friends all over the world asking, "Are you okay? Do you want to come crash on our couch for a bit? Canada is far colder than Los Angeles, but it's nice to live here." They joked, maybe now would be a good time for an asteroid to hit. They wondered, I'm DACA. Does this mean I'm going to be deported? They reacted. My dad just picked up an ancient Hawaiian dagger and hurled it into the wall. It stuck. He's not going to take it out until Trump is impeached. I lay in bed, staring up at our popcorn ceiling. What would happen to me? Would I be sent to live in a camp because my father was Muslim? Would I have to register? Would my father's mosque be bombed? Would he be safe when he went to pray every Friday? He lives in Denver, which is a fairly liberal city, but still, one never knows where hate will strike. And there are my students, my poor students. They could not control the fact that they were not white. They could not control that their new president considered them to be rapists and criminals. They could not control that their parents had bought them here for a better life. They could not control that some Americans had dismissed a man's hateful rhetoric as nonsense, while others sincerely believed it. They were criminals, I was a terrorist, and we had all received a massive middle finger. First day. I decided to wear black to work the next day. I was not the only teacher to do so. Hardly anyone smiled. Administration gave us no guidance on how to handle the situation. I knew that as an English teacher and one who specialized in the analysis of rhetoric, much of this duty would fall on me. I walked into class, not sure if I would have to lead a full therapy session or if we would continue analyzing a letter from Abigail Adams. One of my students wandered over to the board and wrote in huge letters, "Deportation Day." We all chuckled at his joke as I erased it. I don't see this as Deportation Day or as a day in which we should fall into despair, I told my students, most of whom looked as though a close family member had just died. Remember that great change comes in times of strife. If there's never any strife, then we would never grow as a society. Remember that the greatest revolutionaries rose up because they had to. Revolution does not just happen because it happens because there are rights being damaged, and one has to stand up for those rights. So I see this day as, I scribbled on the board, Revolution Day. It's our time to rise up. If we just sit back, then nothing will change, and we will have reason to despair. But if we fight, if we stand up, then justice will prevail. My students nodded, relieved by my attempt at a Dead Poets Society moment. The rest of the day, I let them write out their feelings. I listened as they confessed their fears for their families, for themselves, and for other minorities. Would their moms be taken away? How could those who voted for him be so stupid? Could they not see that his rhetoric was damaging? Had they not studied history and seen this happen before? As they spoke, a few asked if I would leave, as I had joked I would if Trump got elected. I had seriously considered it and had spent some time the night before studying what it would take for me to move back to Australia, where I'd lived for a brief period, or to go to Canada, only to find that the website had crashed. I'd even asked Paul if he would be willing to go abroad. But if I were to leave, I would be running away, and I could not do that. One student finally reminded us, America has dealt with crap before and come back stronger than ever. So I have faith we will face this and continue to kick ass. My Baba. I knew I needed to talk to my dad, my Baba. Would he want to leave? Would this be the final straw? Was this the concrete proof he needed that Americans were idiots? How are you doing, Baba? I asked, stuck in anxious LA traffic. I'm okay, disappointed, but okay. His voice cackled over the phone. I'm glad I campaigned for Hillary. I feel like I could have done more. But she was also a flawed candidate. I asked Baba, are we going to be sent to the camps now? Are we going to have to register? Baba laughed. Trump is as evil as Hitler, but he's not as smart or as charismatic. I'm not worried about that. Are you going to leave? I continued, concerned. Do you want to move back to Egypt? No, he answered frankly. This is my country too. I deserve to be here just as much as anyone else. I know a lot of your students are immigrants or have parents who are immigrants, so tell them that too. We have every right to be here. We're American too. And I'll go ahead and end there. And I think we're on to questions now. So hand it over to Claire, I believe. Yes, so thank you.
All right. Let's see if we can bring us all. Let's see. I am seeing, Amy. I don't see.
Alyssa might have stepped out.
Okay. And then Amy, can you say something?
Yeah, I'm here.
Oh, okay. Is anybody else, let's see, is anybody else not able to see Amy? Or is it just me?
I can see Amy.
I can
Okay,
see
fine. All right. It just may be a little connection issue. So anyways, we're all here. Yay. Um, and let's see. Alyssa had muted herself and then I unmuted her. So I'm going to mute her again because I think she wants to be muted right now. Maybe? I don't know.
so she's muted.
Okay. So that was such a wonderful collection of readings, and I am so grateful to all of you for putting this book together, or to Alyssa and Amy, you specifically, for putting this book together and making this call to women to submit pieces. They were all very powerful, and I can certainly say that I have not been the same since 2016. And now I feel like an old wound is just reopened, not just reopened, but gouged after the debate. So I just kind of want to open it up. If anyone in the audience has any questions that you want to pose in the chat or in the Ask a Question feature, you're welcome to do that. I do actually have a question for those of you who are therapists in the group tonight. At an open mic that I hosted recently, a woman had written a piece in response to COVID and her experience, and she's a therapist, and she said that she is finding herself going through the same things that her clients are going through, and so they're coming to her and talking to her about the anxieties and the just everything, all of it, and for the first time, she's in it too. And I'm just wondering what that's like as therapists to be going through the same thing that your clients are.
I think I can speak to that. Yeah, I know for me, I'm also a counselor educator. I work at Lewis and Clark, and I work with counseling students. And, one of the things we learn so much about in a counseling program is about maintaining that appropriate clinical distance between you and your clients, which under normal circumstances is not that difficult to do. Even if you're working with people who have similar life experiences as you, it's much easier to maintain that clinical distance. But since COVID started and, sessions went virtual, it has been really different to hear, everything a client is talking about how it's hard to stay at home all the time, and they're really worried about, a loved one getting sick, or they're, stressed out because their kid is home from school and they don't want their kid to be home from school. So it's been really strange because for the first time, like the other person said, I'm going through all of those things too. If this is a checklist, I can check them all off in my experience as well. And so it has been really interesting to still maintain that clinical distance that needs to happen, because I can 100% empathize in a really clear way with what's happening with my clients. And they know that I'm stuck at home too. So it has been a really strange, it hasn't been bad entirely, but it has made the clinical work really different.
And I would add maybe a slightly different perspective, although I think you're saying a little bit of this as well, Meg. But and of course, I don't teach counseling; I just do it. So that makes it easier in a little bit, because I think if I had to be teaching all the rules, I would have to be following more of them. Not that I don't follow the rules. I don't mean that. But what I do mean is that I think it actually started with the election, that I started to just be a lot more real in the room. And I think that that's only continued with COVID. because clients know that I'm home and know that I'm going through everything that they're going through. I'm also in a state of experiencing wildlife here, along with my clients. And so it just feels to me to be inauthentic, and we're trained to think that honesty is very important, and we're also trained to be authentic, which is also very important. And I think that I've become more and more real. When my clients ask me, "How are you doing?" because they know that I'm trying to deal with everything we are. I answer them honestly, and I also, share with them what I'm doing for self-care and encourage them to do the same. And I write about in a piece in Amy's new book about the pandemic, that struggle of needing to shore up other people when I'm feeling, when I'm coping with all the devastation that all of us.
Yeah.
Sarah, I appreciate the question that Selena has asked about whether or not your father has removed the knife from the wall that he threw.
So it actually was not my father. It is a very close friend of mine named Rose, who is from Hawaii. And she actually sent me a picture that, no, the knife has not been removed. I don't know if we'll be able to see this, but they've actually built a bookshelf, if we can see it, around the knife.
Oh, I can see it. Yes,
the knife is on the wall, and they built a bookshelf around it.
My gosh.
It's quite magical. So that the knife is still there.
That's awesome. So is the thing like that's going to commemorate that moment for always, or will they remove the knife once he leaves office? Because that would be awesome.
I'm not entirely sure. I'll have to ask.
It's so Arthurian. I love it. I know
exactly. The sword from the stone.
It's a very good way to commemorate. I think.
Yes, I love that. And then Bennett mentions talking about shutting down a narcissist abuser. I wanted to know, I'm sure that you all did notice in the debate how, so many things to notice during the debate, but I was particularly outraged by how sometimes Chris Wallace felt the need to placate Trump by saying, "You're going to like the next question." You're going to be happy. He kept saying, "You're going to be happy." And I was like, oh man, that's like enabling 101. Really? Like, it was. So anyway, that's my 2 cents about that.
They needed to pull the plug, shut down the mic. That's the retribution.
Yeah. But then they would say, "I will not be muzzled." They're trying to muzzle me.
Right. First a mask and now a muzzle.
Wow. So anyway, does anybody else have any questions for each other, or comments or thoughts? No.
Meg, I actually, when you talked about your experience growing up, it was exactly what my mom said to my dad. Say, I'm going to the polls to cancel your vote. So it's really funny. He's come around, but it does strike me. What I have noticed is that a lot of people have not had conversations, or it seems like there is that. I don't know. I mean, like, we had the conversations in my house, so it's different. But what I've seen is that it seems like a lot of people don't just witness. But those honest conversations, I think, are really important, especially as social media, or like just only one source of news can really distort information. And so maybe having more conversations would be more powerful.
Yeah. I'm in favor of more conversations. Absolutely.
Me too. I fully believe, and that we all need to do a lot more listening and talking, but listening too. And Selena, maybe that's part of it. The answer to this question that Selena is asking: how can we move forward about the idea of collective trauma as a nation?
I'd like to. I'm not a therapist, but I play one on TV, and I'd like to just throw out that I think as I read from Lorraine Camanzuli's piece earlier, that she says slightly tongue-in-cheek, maybe fury is the remedy to our collective trauma. And I think if you substitute speaking up and listening, I mean, so much of the time in trauma, part of the problem is that those who are traumatized are silenced. And for a variety of reasons that I'm not qualified to speak to, but I know, having suffered my own various traumas, that it can silence you. So there's the speaking up and out part, which comes with, the fury gets to a point where you just can't contain it anymore. And I think that's healthy in this instance. And then also what Alyssa was talking about also, though, is to balance out that is the empathy. And I think I find it really, really difficult right now to have empathy toward my friends who are planning to vote for Trump. And I want to believe that I'm the type of person that can feel grace in these circumstances toward those people many of them who have been part of my life for my whole life, and several of whom I love dearly. And so that's, to Elena's point, that is something that we need to be uncomfortable with, and not just shut it down and unfriend them, like I did. follow my words, not my actions. But just to work with people and work with ourselves more than anything, to understand, to try to understand, and also to bring people in rather than calling people out, I think is so important. We're in this cancel culture, and I get it. There's been some people I've been really happy to see canceled, Harvey Weinstein, cough, cough. But I think we just need to bring more people in. It's like we're never going to get anywhere unless we do that. I had something interesting happen on my Facebook the other day. A friend painted this really interesting candle of William Barr. It was a candle that looked like William Barr. And is that his name? Yeah, Bill Barr, Attorney General. And it was melting. And he had all kinds of things to say about it. And a very dear friend of mine who's Catholic chimed in and said, this isn't art. This is, like very, very angry. And then I said, hey, this is your chance, to my friend who was angry, Barry, to share your art with my other friend who had posted his Bill Barr picture. And the next thing you know, these guys were just like sharing art back and forth. Like Barry, who served in Japan, is like really into samurai warriors, and then other guys into horses. And the next thing you know, that they were like best friends. And I was like, oh, there still is maybe hope. I don't know. I'd like to say, I know we're about to close out here. I'd like to say one more thing, and that is, because I cannot not say this. The other reason this book exists is Regal House Publishing and Pack Press, which is an imprint. They're a small, independent, women-run press out of North Carolina, and they saw this book and the potential of this book and the reason for this book. And I just want to say a big thank you to Janie at Regal House and Pam and the entire team. And also, again, Clara, thank you so much to you for hosting and putting this together.
Well, it's my pleasure. And gosh, I wish, I know this conversation could go on and on and on. But I do want to, of course, as the bookseller in the room, I want to remind people that green button center screen that says Purchase Fury here takes you right to our website. If you're watching this recorded on YouTube, there's a link down in the description that also takes you to the Village Books website where you can purchase the book. And I want to thank everybody in the audience who's watching and listening tonight and chiming in. We appreciate your being here. And to all of you ladies here, thank you so much for joining me. This was wonderful, and I think that's it. I think this is over and out. Okay,
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Vote. Please vote.
vote. Yeah,
Yes, vote. Go vote.